Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is Pro-Revenge Story. So my dad owns a house that he's been renting for some time now. The tenants that lived there were for the most part decent people who my dad thought were trustworthy. That all changed about 2 months into the tenancy when the tenant refused to pay the month's rent. This was back in April 2025, just after Easter weekend. "I've been having some financial difficulties," Mr. Reynolds, the tenant, told my dad over the phone. "Just need a little more time." My dad showed some leniency and gave them another month to pay up what was owed. May came and went and they didn't pay a thing. By this point, my dad was frustrated by the whole situation and being 2 months out of rent money. He offered them a deal. "Look, Kevin," my dad said during their meeting, "leave the house by next Friday and just pay half of what you owe me." They countered with a different agreement. "How about this?" Mr. Reynolds suggested, leaning forward in his chair. "We'll leave the house in a clean state with all of our furniture left behind as compensation." My dad, wanting to just be done with them, agreed. "Fine, just make sure everything is in good condition when you leave." Cue to when my dad gets to the house in early June, finding the place in a mess, with none of the furniture left behind, including the furniture that belonged to my dad in the first place. The 2 sofas that my dad owned were left behind, but they were trashed and left in the shed. "What happened here?" Dad asked as we walked through the empty living room. "They took everything." When my dad confronted them asking for them to pay up the full amount that the furniture was worth, he was met with a promise of payment after 2 weeks. "I'll get you the money by the end of the month, I promise," Mr. Reynolds said, sounding completely insincere. My dad didn't believe him, and when he requested they pay earlier, Mr. Reynolds replied, "Good luck getting your money," followed by laughing emojis in his text. This made my dad angry, and he decided that he wasn't going to let this slide. "I've had enough of this," Dad told me one evening as we sat in his kitchen. "These people think they can just walk all over me." My dad knew that the tenant was a Christian pastor at New Life Community Church, and his son also had some job related to the church as a youth minister. My dad contacted the church and explained everything from how they hadn't paid him rent money to stealing the furniture and trashing the place. "I don't want to cause trouble," my dad explained to the church administrator, "but I believe in honesty and integrity, especially from church leaders." The church was somewhat interested about this behavior. The next day, my dad gets an angry phone call from Pastor Reynolds' son, Tyler. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Tyler shouted over the phone. "Contacting the church like that? You're being completely unfair." My dad hung up on him only for him to attempt to ring 10 times after he hung up. "Can you believe this guy?" Dad said, showing me the missed call notifications. "After what they did to us?" From what we could piece together, the church had told the pastor that if he didn't settle things with my dad, him and his son would lose their jobs. "We have certain standards for our leadership," the church elder had apparently told them. "This behavior doesn't align with our values." My dad received the full amount for the furniture that same day and agreed to back off. "I didn't mean to threaten your job," my dad told Mr. Reynolds when he came to deliver the payment. "I just wanted what was fair." "I understand," Mr. Reynolds replied stiffly, handing over the envelope of cash. My dad later said, "It was never about the money but the way this guy treated him and his values." "You know," my dad told me while we were fixing up the house to rent again, "as a Christian myself, I was really disappointed in how they behaved. It's not just about the money, it's about keeping your word and treating others with respect." The next one is an entitled people story. I need to share this story because it still makes me smile every time I think about how perfectly everything worked out. My wife and I bought our dream property about 5 years ago. It's nothing fancy, just a modest house on 10 acres of land with a beautiful creek running right through the middle of it. The creek was honestly the main selling point for us. Crystal clear water, plenty of fish, and the soothing sound of flowing water year-round. We'd spend summer evenings sitting by the creek with a cold drink, watching the sunset reflect off the water. When we purchased the property, we made absolutely sure that we owned the water rights to that creek. Our lawyer checked everything twice, and we have all the documentation showing that we own complete water rights for the portion of the creek on our land. This wasn't just about paperwork either. The previous owner had paid good money decades ago to secure those rights, and it was all properly registered with the county. The creek starts from a spring about a mile upstream from our property, flows through our land, and then continues downstream through several other properties before eventually joining a river. For the first few years, everything was perfect. Our closest neighbors were an elderly couple who kept to themselves and never caused any issues. We had a friendly, wave-over-the-fence kind of relationship, which was exactly what we wanted. Then they decided to retire and move closer to their kids, and they sold their property to a new family. The new neighbor moved in during spring, and right from the start, I could tell he was going to be a problem. He was one of those guys who thinks he knows everything about everything and isn't shy about sharing his opinions. Within the first week, he was already walking around our property line, surveying everything like he owned the place. I introduced myself, trying to be friendly, but he barely acknowledged me before launching into questions about the creek. He started by asking if he could fish in the creek from our side since the bank was easier to access. I politely declined, explaining that it was private property and we preferred to keep it that way. He didn't like that answer. Over the next few weeks, I caught him and his friends on our property several times, always near the creek. Each time I'd remind him it was private property, and each time he'd give me some excuse about how he didn't realize or how he thought the creek was public access. Things really escalated about 2 months after he moved in. I came home from work one day to find him setting up a small dock on the creek bank right on my property. When I confronted him, he actually had the nerve to tell me that the creek was public waterway and anyone could access it. He claimed he'd done his research and that all waterways were public property in our state. He said something about how I might own the land, but nobody owns water, and that he had every right to build his dock and use the creek however he wanted. I tried explaining that he was wrong, that I owned the water rights, but he just talked over me. He'd apparently convinced himself that he was right, and nothing I said was going to change his mind. He went on this whole rant about property rights and public access laws, completely making stuff up as he went along. The guy was so confident in his incorrect information that it was almost impressive. When I told him to remove his dock materials immediately or I'd call the sheriff, he laughed at me. He actually said I could call whoever I wanted, but the creek was staying public and he was going to use it. He told me that if I had a problem with it, I could take him to court. But I'd lose because the law was on his side. Then he informed me that he'd already told several of his friends they could come use the creek anytime because it was public property and everyone had a right to enjoy nature. That's when I decided to stop arguing and start planning. I went inside, pulled out all my property documents, and reviewed my water rights paperwork. Then I did some research of my own. Turns out, owning water rights means you have some pretty significant control over how that water is used. In our state, if you own the water rights to a creek, you can divert the water, dam it, or redirect it, as long as you're not completely cutting off the flow to downstream property owners. You just need to maintain what's called reasonable flow to downstream neighbors. I consulted with a water rights attorney just to make absolutely sure I understood everything correctly. He confirmed that I was well within my legal rights to exercise my water rights however I saw fit, as long as I didn't completely eliminate the flow downstream. He even helped me draw up the proper notices and documentation I'd need to file with the county. The next week, I hired a contractor who specialized in water management. We designed a system that would divert about 70% of the creek flow into a large pond on the far side of my property. The pond would eventually overflow and feed back into the creek downstream, maintaining that reasonable flow requirement. It was completely legal, properly permitted, and well within my rights as the water rights owner. The contractor got to work immediately. We installed a diversion system right at the upstream edge of my property. It took about a week to complete, and I made sure everything was done by the book. All permits filed, all regulations followed, everything documented. The neighbor watched the whole process from his property, but he didn't say anything at first. I think he was trying to figure out what we were doing. Once the diversion was complete and we started redirecting the water, the results were immediate. The creek that had been flowing through my property at a decent depth suddenly turned into a shallow trickle. The section of the creek on my land, including the area where the neighbor had wanted to build his dock, was now barely 6 inches deep in most places. It was still flowing, still a creek, but it was now basically just a rocky stream bed with some water running through it. Meanwhile, my new pond on the other side of the property was filling up nicely. The neighbor came storming over the next day. He was absolutely furious, demanding to know what I'd done to his creek. I calmly explained that it wasn't his creek, it was my creek, and I had simply exercised my legal water rights as the property owner. I showed him the permits, the water rights documentation, and the letter from my attorney confirming everything was legal. He sputtered something about how I couldn't just take the creek water, how it was illegal, how he was going to sue me. I just smiled and reminded him of what he'd said weeks earlier. He'd insisted the creek was public property, that anyone could use it, that I didn't own the water. Well, I told him if that were true, then I shouldn't have any legal water rights, should I? But since I do have water rights and those rights are legally documented and registered with the county, that pretty clearly proves the creek isn't public property at all. I explained very slowly, like I was talking to a child, that water rights are a form of property ownership. You can't have water rights to public property. The existence of my water rights was legal proof that the creek was private property, specifically my private property. And as the owner of those rights, I could divert, dam, or redirect the water as I saw fit within the bounds of state regulations. He tried arguing that I was cutting off his access to the water, but I pointed out that he never had legal access to begin with. He was welcome to use the little trickle that was still flowing if he wanted, I told him with a smile, since he'd been so insistent about his right to use the creek. Of course, there wasn't enough water left for fishing, kayaking, or any of the other activities he'd planned. The dock materials he'd stored on my property were now sitting next to a pathetic stream that couldn't float a paper boat. He threatened legal action, but I encouraged him to go ahead. I knew he wouldn't find a lawyer willing to take his case, not when I had clear documentation of my water rights and had followed every regulation perfectly. A few days later, I received a cease and desist letter from his attorney, but my attorney responded with copies of all my water rights documentation and permits. That was the last I heard from his lawyer. The neighbor stopped talking to me entirely after that, which was fine by me. His friends never showed up to use the creek either. Funny how that works when there's no water to use. He put his property up for sale about 6 months later and moved away. I heard through the grapevine that he'd complained to everyone who would listen about the crazy neighbor who stole his creek, but most people just laughed at him when they heard the full story. After he moved out, I actually reversed the diversion and let the creek return to its normal flow. The new neighbors who bought his property are wonderful people who respect property boundaries and have never once questioned my ownership of the water rights. We've even become good friends, and I occasionally let them fish in the creek from my property with permission. The whole experience taught me an important lesson about dealing with entitled people. Sometimes you can't reason with someone who's convinced they're right. Sometimes the only way to prove your point is through malicious compliance. He wanted to insist the creek was public? Fine. But public waterways don't have private water rights attached to them. By exercising those rights, I proved definitively that the creek was mine, and there wasn't a thing he could do about it. My wife still jokes that I'm the only person she knows who solved a property dispute by temporarily making a creek disappear. The pond we created is still there, by the way. We stocked it with fish, and it's become our favorite spot on the property. So in the end, the entitled neighbor's ridiculous claims actually led to us improving our land. I'd call that a win. The first one is a petty revenge story, so I get on my flight yesterday for a short 1 hour and 20-minute flight. Start chatting up the dude I'm next to, and he's very loud but extremely nice. I quickly figure out he's a disabled combat vet. Thank him for his sacrifice. He got teary-eyed me too, maybe. He was in the first Gulf War, his neck was messed up, and his life is on disability now. All the while I'm getting this info, Karen is in the seat in front of me with earbuds in. She keeps looking over her shoulder and trying to shove her earbuds in further. She's clearly getting physically frustrated, and every time my new buddy talks again, she has to do it all over again. Now, normally I might talk less to a loud child or a loud drunk, etc., but this guy is telling me his life story, and he's also a big sports fan. Packers for those that care, and I'm a big sports fan. Seahawks, so we have a lot to talk about. He's obviously lonely, wife divorced him after the accident, doesn't hear from the kids much, etc. You guessed it, Karen is taken to leaning forward in her seat, continues to look over her shoulder, and at this point she's probably suffered brain damage from shoving those earbuds in. I'm ready for a nap, but duck Karen and her attitude. Pretty sure everyone else has figured out he's disabled, and I am getting genuine smiles from everyone else around. So I just keep making small talk about politics, he knows a lot, and sports and weather and my work in Alaska, which fascinates the crap out of him. Best part is, each time we have stretches of silence, I'm the one restarting the convo, and Karen keeps side-glancing me, clearly having stomach troubles as she rocks forward again, wincing as she pushes the cursed earbuds closer together. He was awesome and deserves mad respect for his sacrifice. If his kids read this, please reach out to him. He lives in Seattle and his kids all live in Wisconsin. The next one is a malicious compliance story, so this is a very specific one. If you have been involved with shipboard operations, you can skip through most of this. Otherwise, read below for the background. So our ship would go off the coast weekly for training and deployment workups, so we would head out Monday morning and return Friday afternoon. Sometimes stay out the weekend too. A lot of what we did were drills practice. Shut off an engine and react. Pretend there was a fire and react. Real basic stuff. We could do this all alone. So we would be out in an area with limited shipping to be a problem, because during these drills we would go DIW, dead in the water, lose engines, which also leads to no steering, as well as sometimes loss of electricity. Sometimes even cover windows to simulate smoke and visibility. Anyway, you don't want to be near land or other ships while doing this, as you are not a sitting target, but a moving one due to wind/tide/currents. We would be a hazard and unpredictable to other ships, so I think you get the setting. So we usually stop the drills by 10 p.m., 2200 HRS. From then until morning, we were steaming in the dark with essentially nowhere to go. We don't drop anchor and sit. We cannot just shut things down and drift. So we literally just drive around in a racehorse pattern. We did minimum speed to keep from rocking, and to steer, you need at least like 3 knots tilled 5 miles per hour for the rudder to work. We would patrol a large box just going back and forth. When we got near the end of the box, we would do a nice and easy 180, let our relief sleep and not break any plates, and head the other way. Every so often doing an adjustment because currents, winds, etc. Our typical daily instructions, night orders, were only to stay in the box. If we accidentally leave the box, we gotta notify the CO. The box was considered safe, but outside of it could be an issue. Way outside could be newsworthy. There was no instruction on how to stay in the box. Very important. A regular rule, standing orders, was that if we detected a ship that would have a CPA, closest point of approach, closest it would come to us, was like 6 nanometers, or 6 kYids, I don't remember, so I will say NM, or less. We had to notify the captain before it reached 10 nanometers, with a recommendation, of course, speed adjustment to keep it outside that 6. He would either approve or disapprove and say something like 5.5 nanometers is okay, but notify me again if it gets closer than 5 nanometers. This would be like if the other ship was going to pass behind us and we would needlessly speed up. Sailors start here, MC. So at night, we would try to avoid needlessly waking the captain. Like, do you want to call the company owner in the middle of the night for something not necessary? So if we had this situation come up while in the box, we would do what we could to avoid it. So following both orders, if a ship was coming close, we would see if we could turn to avoid getting within that 10 nanometers range. Turning and staying in the box followed the night orders, and doing that to keep that ship outside the 6 nanometers CPA before it broached 10 nanometers allowed us to not have to call the captain per the standing orders. All watchstanders, officer of the deck, did this, as we all felt this was following the orders with the discretion we were given, just stay in the box. We were not ordered to do racecourse patterns or any pattern, just turn before leaving the box. Well, I guess the old man did not agree, as one night he must have stopped in and seen this happen. Not happy with that, and probably even more unhappy that this was standard. Like we were doing him a favor and not really even being MC as we interpreted the orders that way. We literally used the discretion we were given by being able to do whatever we wanted in the box. But CO thought we were doing MC. Since our decision to turn was based on the other ship that necessitated a call to him, even though we had discretion to do this otherwise. So the CO forced us to MC. Captain literally changed the orders. Now, if we made any course speed changes due to shipping and not solely due to being at the edge of the box, we had to call in. I think he thought we weren't seeing a lot of shipping, because he was now getting woken up multiple times at night. That's after long days of drills. So instead of being the person with the most sleep, he did not stand night watch. He now got the least. I can't remember if that got changed back by the end of the next week or the week after. But even he, huge micromanager, realized how dumb it was to get a call at 2 a.m., 0200, saying, "Captain, we are 5 minutes from turning due to the end of the box. We have a ship that is predicted to have a CPA of 6.0 nanometers on our bow, in front of us, right now, and it is at 12 nanometers. Per your orders, we are recommending maintaining current plan to turn in now 4 minutes. When we make the turn, we estimate a new CPA of 9 nanometers on our stern, behind us. Note that they could have turned 5 minutes early per the old rules and not had to call, and this same scenario could be in the middle of the box and turning early." The next one is an entitled people story. This happened last night, and it's basically what it says. I, 34F, live in an apartment building where we're not allowed to have anything flammable, including grills, fireworks, bonfires, fire pits, etc. For the last couple weeks, I've been having issues with my neighbors being loud after quiet hours and waking up my 6-year-old. I've asked them to stop multiple times and explained that my daughter is asleep by 9:30, even in the summer, and they keep waking her up. After I complained the first couple times last week, they set up a TV directly outside of my apartment and had all the kids except mine invited out there to watch it at 10 p.m., meaning they were running around and screaming directly outside my daughter's window after excluding only her. I went out pretty hot that night and let them know I was done with their shoe, and if they didn't stop, I'd inform the manager and the police. Police are valid because of quiet hours, and it's what the manager says to do, even though I normally wouldn't call them unless it was an actual emergency, but they ended up being quiet the rest of the night. It didn't last, though, and I was not the only person to complain. They kept going for the last week and a half, but it would be random and sporadic, so I couldn't get them on camera. I invested in an actual security camera today. So, till last night. Fireworks are going off directly over the apartment buildings, and I do mean directly over, to the point where it could have easily caught the building on fire. We also haven't had rain in a couple weeks, and everything is very dry and just waiting for a spark. And they're also setting them off less than 3 feet away from the edge of their porch. All of this is on camera because I ran upstairs and got them from my upstairs window. I came out and yelled across the lot, "I've asked y'all to stop. You're still going. I've got you on camera. I'm giving it to the landlord. You might want to look for somewhere else to live." Well, this old drunk of a man in his 50s, we'll call him Bobby because that's his name, who was also out there letting off fireworks and who has put himself in the middle of everything in the complex since I moved in 6 years ago, came over and started getting in my face. He pulled his fist back and went to punch me, but my great uncle was a semi-pro boxing coach, so I know how to fight, and I immediately dropped into a stance, which is the only reason he missed my face as he swung at me and scraped down my body, pushing me backwards. At this point, my other neighbor, a little old lady who you'd think didn't have a mean bone in her body, came rushing out of her apartment and started defending me, along with a few other neighbors. Cops were called. I was told I could press charges if I wanted, but it would be a misdemeanor. But if I waited and he kept bothering me, they could push it up to something higher, so I just decided to wait for that, and because I didn't feel right sending him to jail for trying to hit me, and I knew it would just cause more drama. During this whole thing, Bobby kept screaming at me that I would be out of here in a month, and I have no right to tell others to be quiet, and I'm just a ruiner of fun. And the last part could be true, but my landlord called me this morning and has already confirmed that I am not the one getting kicked out for this situation. I just don't get it. We all live here. We all have the same rules to follow. I'm neurodivergent, so rule following is a big thing for me, but I still try to not say anything to other people until they're being unsafe or they're affecting me and my family. I just don't understand how people can be so entitled to think that they don't have to follow the rules that allow people to live together in peace, or why they think it's okay to risk people's literal lives with fire during a no-burning time while they're too drunk to do anything if something were to go wrong. So, yeah, that's my story. The next one is an entitled parent story. I posted this story many years ago when it first happened, but at the time I had some facts wrong because I was staying out of a lot of it, and it was an ongoing situation that didn't have an ending yet. I suddenly remembered this story many years later, so I got some corrections from my mother, who was the primary party to properly tell the story. This happened around 2017, but my foggy memory was filled in between the gaps after I asked for details. Sorry if the format is weird, I'm on Mobile. Important for a lot of context here is that I live in a tiny rustic town with only a few thousand people, and my house is a condo. This is a type of house that has multiple living units on one property. We shared a driveway and a backyard only separated by a line of weak, rotted fence. It began on a day I was home alone, around 17 years old. My mother went shopping with my younger sister and left the back door open for our elderly dog, who at the time liked going outside to sit under the sun or use the bathroom as needed. As I was in the living room, a strange shape appeared in the hallway of a new creature we definitely didn't have. A kitten so tiny, I didn't think it could even walk at that size. I rushed up and quickly herded her into another room away from the dog, seeing how she walked in from our open back door. After I looked her over, she was tiny and relatively happy, but tired, although she was missing a foot. I let her sleep on the couch as I texted my mother about the situation, and she rushed home. The kitten didn't have a collar, and we weren't about to release her back outside again. After she came home, my mother spoke to the surrounding neighbors to find the owner. She eventually talked to the neighbors in the unit next to us. We already had issues with the people in the next unit before for more petty reasons, but nothing we bothered to start a fight over. Things like revving a motorcycle at 11 p.m. on the lawn or causing a rat problem in the shared walls. So when she knocked, the tension was high, but they explained the situation. The mother of the family said her cat recently had kittens. She had gotten out one night and met a stray tom. She had a large litter that caused restricted womb space, making some kittens not fully develop, thus the missing foot. They also said they had left the door open and all the kittens escaped. They did not want the kittens back and didn't care what we did with the one we found. She had crawled through the shared rotted fence to get into our yard. As cat distribution system works, we decided to take on the kitten, although at first there was hesitation due to the existing animal in the house. We called it a day and let her sleep in my bedroom to keep the dog and cat apart as we decided what to do by morning. As morning came around, we decided on an official adoption after seeing if the dog would harm her. We found he had no interest and was plenty retired from chasing cats. So, thus we began with the official process. First, we took her to the store for cat supplies. A food bowl, bed, litter box, kitten meal, and some new toys chosen by the cat herself. To our surprise, the neighbors were at the store as well. Perks of living in an almost village, I suppose. They stared at us, and I slipped off to find more toys, feeling the discomfort. As I was gone, they approached my mother and shared some short words of congrats on the new cat, but didn't say much else before leaving. After that, we took her to the vet for an exam and to get her registered. After giving the vaccines, checking on her disabled leg, and doing a general exam, the vet officialized the ownership with medical papers of her appointment and updated shots. We chose a name and she was now legally ours. The vet also told us the count of kittens that recently came in, accounting for the entire litter finding owners around the neighborhood. We were the last to bring the kitten in because of our decision on if we should adopt or not. We were informed she wasn't the only one with a missing foot either. Another perk of a small town, only one vet that everyone goes to. With that relief of news, we brought her back home and our new life with a cat began. It was normal for about 2 months when things started going oddly. The neighbors suddenly asked for her back, to which my mother obviously said no. The parents insisted, saying their little daughter wanted the kitten back, and she was still theirs. My mother explained that she was registered with us now, and no longer belonged to them as they voluntarily gave her up. Although they threatened the cops, no cops were called, as we legally did own her now. About a week later, there was a knock at the door. I answered it to see a little child standing on our porch. She only looked about 6 years old and had these big, sad eyes asking to see her kitty. I was mostly staying out of the situation, so I called over my mother, who handled it a lot less awkwardly. She brought the cat over to show her that she was healthy and happy, but also explained that we were her family. The child looked sad, gave a small pet, and ran back to her door. When my mother looked over, she saw the parents standing by their door, glaring daggers our way. They clearly sent her over, attempting to guilt us with their kid. My mother swiftly got her microchipped in case anything happened, as she was getting nervous around the neighbors. For a few more weeks, they continued passively asking for the cat back, before they instead changed to spreading rumors around the neighborhood. When my little sister brought a friend home from school, the friend looked at our cat and said along the lines, "I heard you stole her from the kid next door. Is it true?" With shock, my mother explained absolutely not. She was relinquished and registered with us. That we cared for her and were the ones that got her vaccinated and adopted her through official means. But the rumors of the cat theft continued for a while longer. Around the Christmas season, things suddenly took a turn when around dinner we heard a crash from the driveway. We all rushed out to see the father had backed his truck into our car. He was backing in quickly and was very drunk. My mother called the police only to be told he had no license, the car registration was expired, and had no insurance. He went off on my mother, claiming it was all because we were thieves and kidnapped their innocent daughter's cat. I didn't hesitate to run back inside and not get involved as the arguing continued. Less than 2 weeks later, they suddenly moved out and cut all contact. They didn't report to court or inform the police or anyone else in the county where they were going. The family fell off the map for almost a full year before a family friend ran into the father working at a gas station the next town over. My mother contacted his new job, explained the lawsuit, and that she needed information to contact him, and got them to relinquish information to send a letter to the family's mail. It took a long time to get all the needed information from the workplace, employee safety and such, but eventually the family was pressured into paying her the court-ordered money for the car repairs. They tried to countersue for the theft of the cat, but was dismissed when we provided the necessary documents of adoption. The kitten is fully grown now, a spoiled princess that runs my mother's house. I go over and visit often to see her and give lots of cuddles, and we have 2 more rescue cats along with her. Unfortunately, the dog passed away in 2019, but he also lived a very happy and spoiled life. After the lawsuit was finished, we dropped contact with the family and they stopped demanding the cat back when their countersuit was dismissed. Every so often, one of us does run into 1 or 2 of the family, and they still shoot glares if they recognize us. I took pictures the day I first found the kitten, and I still have them if anyone wants pet tax LOL. I think she was around 7 weeks. Anyway,